Welcome to a true spiritual adventure story like the world has never known with your host, Dr. James Yogati Weldon. Good day, this is Dr. Jim Weldon speaking to you from Heavenly Mountain in Boone, North Carolina. Our community here, which is dedicated to bridging our gaps in the understanding between the spiritual traditions of the world and explaining the stages and steps of consciousness. In today's episode is a continuing story, a true spiritual adventure story from my third novel, the story behind the greatest story ever told, subtitled Memories from the Life of Jesus. And I talk about it that way because this is exactly the way that it happened. Without going into this in much detail, you can listen to the earlier episodes to clarify any questions which you might have. Many years ago, in an advanced state of consciousness known as Turiya, completely beyond my control, I begin to see and experience, literally like walking through a 3D movie, episodes, scenes from the life of Jesus. And after a few days, beyond the state of normal consciousness, very early in the morning, I woke up and I said, I should start writing this down. And the purpose of this work is to help bridge our understanding, to give a fuller description of the training and the life of Jesus. In the same way, no one would ever be able to understand your life personally if they were only able to see and know just a few years. The episodes of the life of Jesus that are recorded many years later and compiled many years later really represents 2 to 3 years of the life of Jesus. And so in the early portion, really this is the second book of that story. The first book of that story told the story of how when Jesus was a child, the 3 wise men arrived at home and told to his parents that this young child needed to go to India to be trained by a spiritual master. And that has taken place in this part of the story. Several decades have passed and he has returned home. And at this point is really where the Bible picks up. And in the Gospel of John, it describes really 3 annual Passover feasts that occurred during the course of Jesus' ministry. It hasn't begun yet. And this is one reason why it's commonly held that it really lasted between 2 and 3 years. And Luke says that Jesus was in his 30s when he began his ministry. And I'm going to share some details of that first year of his ministry, which begins with his forerunner, John the Baptist. In the book of Malachi, there's a prophecy about a forerunner who would prepare the way for the Lord. It says, "See, I will send my messenger who will prepare the way before me. Then suddenly the Lord you are seeking will come to his temple. The messenger of the covenant whom you desire will come." And so that saying many years back was fulfilled 400 years later by John the Baptist, who prepared the way for the coming of the Christ when Jesus was to begin his very short ministry. And he declares, "Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." And so in his 30s now, he has come home. He's left the District of Galilee after meeting his family after many years, which included the town of Nazareth, where the story was told. And he traveled into the wilderness near the Jordan River to be baptized, to meet John the Baptist. And John the Baptist had drew crowds as he preached and baptized individuals. And as soon as Jesus was baptized, he came up out of the water. And at that moment, I talked in the last episode on how heaven was opened and he saw the Spirit of God, it says, descending like a dove and lightning upon him. And a voice, so it is said, came forth that said, "This is my son I love. With him I am well pleased." And so that inner experience of what he passed into, I tried to explain as best as I could in actually the last episode. And after he was baptized, Jesus went into the desert and fasted for a period of meditation for 40 days. And this time of 40 days is very commonly known in the East. And in India, a pilgrimage is quite often in silence done for this period of time. When a new practice is given, when a new knowledge is given, 40 days is typical of the time because it takes that long to integrate such new insights into consciousness. And it is said that Satan used this time to tempt Jesus. You need to understand that when the Bible was compiled over 300 years later, put together in a form at the time of Constantine, the actual written records of what had happened didn't get recorded for 60 to 70 years after Jesus was crucified and passed out of that region. And so the tremendous influence of the church, modifications of those writings, sought to put in many things which were more easily understood. Remember, there were two basic schools of thought 300 years after the passing out of that region by Jesus. Constantine brought all of the church leaders together. There really wasn't a huge church. And there were two basic schools of thought. One was influenced very heavily by Saul or Paul, who had this very, very strong experience. And the others were mystics, the Essenes, and others who talked about the divine was experienced and known through deep meditation, deep prayer, and inner experience. The kingdom of heaven was within you. And so what became compiled in the Bible reflected the thought of Paul, because Constantine was fighting against two other emperors in Rome and needed a simple philosophy to inspire the army and consolidate his power. So it was much easier to talk about. You just need to believe. And that became the dominant point of view in Christianity afterwards. It wasn't until many years later when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered and began to come out and other gospels occurred that we begin to understand that there was another point of view. Now, my teacher in this lifetime told me the entire story and the details I'm fleshing out in this work. And so during that time of silence, what was actually happening is that Jesus was integrating the spiritual force which had come into his being. This was the spiritual form which was embodied by his spiritual teacher master that he knew quite well in an earlier time, in an earlier life. And so the manifestation of that force has raised his consciousness into a state where he was able to manifest the healing power to bring redemption and free that culture of the great evils that they had done in the past, that karma, if you will. Communication between the divine and the inner being of Jesus was not so much in words, was in the power and the presence of this great force. And I know this from my own experience with over 40 years studying with these masters, tens of millions of individuals involved around the world. It's a huge phenomenon that's taking place. And many years back, when I spent some time with my teacher, one day as I was walking down the hall with him, he turned and he said to me, "Now we'll learn to communicate without words." A tremendous force came into my body, literally took over the functioning of my physiology. That force made me move, made me go places, walk this place, walk that place, to demonstrate that that being was part of me, completely drive me in whatever direction it needed me to go, and give me insights that personally I didn't know myself. In a like manner, this is what was happening with Jesus during this 40 days. And also he needed to spend some time with John the Baptist, who was definitely a spiritual teacher that he knew from earlier times, and be in his presence during that time, during the silence, so he could integrate this tremendous force that was going to manifest within him. And many insights came during this time, created both in words and in images and feelings, downloads, if you will, from the divine consciousness, which essentially laid out many of the details of what was going to happen in the next few years in his life. In a sense, you could say he was tempted in the desert. He could have become a political leader or a religious leader with huge numbers of individuals following him, but he came for a much deeper purpose, really to free individuals from the suffering, the trauma within their hearts and minds, to raise the awareness and to open a doorway so many individuals could begin gradually to experience this divine insight, this kingdom of heaven within, and also for resolving the karma of many individuals in that culture so that they needn't go through torture. You see, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. As you sow, so shall you reap. And if we do things that harm others in the normal course of the way that the universe works, we are constantly meeting ourselves in the events and circumstances in our life throughout our life. And if we accept the understanding that life is very long and we have a deep backstory, we have a long history we do not remember, in most cases it's better not to, because the past is a lesser evolved state. And so if we had committed some atrocities, if atrocities had come to us, we don't want to remember all those details, many difficult, hard details. And of course, at this time in the world was one of the hardest times in our recorded history. The darkness was at its zenith in that region, in that area of the world, and it needed some lightning. So one of the things that the power of grace and love does is it dissolves some of that negativity, that individual karma, that group karma, so that individuals don't need to go through so much. And so in a very real sense, he came into his life to save his people, save the people from the suffering, and in a certain sense, take on some of that fruit of the actions. And it's one of the reasons why he went through the crucifixion, innocent though he was, to resolve that. And beings like this essentially are like giant garbage collectors. They collect this negativity, this karma, through grace and love, dissipate it. We don't have to go through all that's necessary. And a lot of the details of this are also explained in my earlier two books. My first story, Living the Enlightened Life, and the second one, The Rise of the First World Teacher. And so Jesus and some of his first students came to a town, Cana. And in the town, the District of Galilee, to attend a wedding party, and his mother Mary also attended. And the host of that wedding party did not have enough wine for everyone. And this was considered to be a very embarrassing situation. And then Mary intervened on behalf of the wedding host and told Jesus about the problem. And in this part of the story, Jesus miraculously changed 6 barrels of wine for the wedding party. And of all the different miracles that do occur, and I'm going to talk about how these things are possible, it seemed a little minor, this one, but it did accomplish an important thing. It showed that Jesus had concern for people's everyday problems. He certainly did. And that even if they were small problems, it shows that he was able to intervene even in these minor situations. And actually throughout all the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there are descriptions of some 34 miracles performed. But all told, there may have been more, and there were many more. What was written down was what was passed down from person to person. 60 to 70 years had passed between the time when Jesus had come up from the tomb and showed himself to his disciples. That's a lot of time. If individuals lived 30 to 40 years in that reign, we're talking about several generations, at least one full generation, and then were compiled some of these earlier books and works. So all kinds of amazing things happen, probably because there was a need to show physically. People were so bound in matter. Very physical things needed to be demonstrated to show the power of the divine. Of course, if we think of the world we live in today, many of the things which we consider everyday occurrences would be seen as miracles. Many of the medications and medicines that are used today would be miracle drugs, would be, if you gave a little round tablet to somebody, it would be considered a blessing. Flying through space, being able to communicate vast distances all over the world. Many, many, many of the things that are seen are parts of technology. And spirituality also has a technology. There are scriptures in India. One of them is called the Yoga Sutras of a great Rishi yogi called Patanjali, which actually lays out practices to invoke, to develop these capabilities. These are advanced practices. You can't learn this kind of knowledge from a book, believe me. You can't learn the deeper teachings from a book. You need to be in the presence of the higher consciousness and to receive the energy, the grace, the power, if you will, that empowers these. Anyone can say, oh, fill these casks with water and take some of it to the wedding party. And when they open the cask, it is sweetened. The taste of that is sweetened so much that it's like wine. Few people can do that. But honestly, I've seen such amazing things take place. Many, many amazing things. Many of them I outline that I personally experienced in my 2 novels, true spiritual adventure novels. These things really, really happened, really happened. Everyone was healed in his presence. In his presence, the love, the compassion, the grace manifested very powerfully. People just being in that presence openly felt tremendous relief. Tears ran from their eyes. They felt a heightened state of awareness. They felt the heavenly presence there. And really the things that were remarked about as miracles were really the minor events that took place. The real miracle was in the spiritual space. Even though people that had passed or appeared to pass came back out of that deathly state. We do this in hospitals these days every day. Controlling over nature. We haven't gotten to that technology where we are able to make it rain, make the sun come out, but I've actually seen these kinds of things happen. Again, you have to find those gems in my earlier works. healing of the sick. Huge numbers of individuals have been healed. I've been in events where tens of thousands of individuals have been healed at one time. And I also talk about that in some of my other works. Casting out of demons. So we can talk about what the demons are, but really the demons are the terror, the memories, the very deep traumas within us. Yes, there are beings who are designed to bring negative forces, and they're lower orders of beings than humans. There are planes of existence. There are. But we're really talking about, in most cases, the demons are not some outside force that's somehow taken over the body. Individuals that commit suicide are fighting demons, their own personal demons, the madness and the fear and the anxiety within. And this is what really is healed. Providing food from a small container, huge amounts of food came. Honestly, I've seen this happen. I've been in events, one in particular, which I described in my earlier works where this happened. I'll talk about some of these healings in some of the ongoing episodes in the second part of this novel, The Story Behind the Greatest Story Ever Told, Memories from the Life of Jesus. And this is continuing to unfold, just like walking through a 3D movie, a hologram of the events. And so now Jesus is completing his preparation, completed his time of silence, and he's beginning his ministry. So join me again for the ongoing story. This is Dr. Jim Weldon speaking to you from our wonderful community here in Heavenly Mountain in Boone, North Carolina. We'll talk again.